Okay, everyone, welcome to the best month of the year, which is October. Maybe it's second place to December, but I'm not sure. I'm in the season, but I have to talk about August and September, and this will be my last event of the summer before going into fall. You'd think I would have a lot to talk about because I have to talk about 2 months of books, but I only have 5 books to talk about today. I had a really slow reading months in August and September because I went home, check out the last vlog for that big unhaul I did while I was at my parents' house, and now I can talk about what I read. And I'm just gonna jump right into it with The Shadow of the Wind. This one is written by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is a book I read in tandem with my mother. We buddy read this one, and if you've been following along for any period of time, you know that we love to buddy read. It's just so happens that we have really bad luck picking books, and this April I put together a big list of 15 books that I was positive we would have good experiences with. And then we keep hating all of those too. So I don't know. My mom, for the record, didn't necessarily hate this one, and she even kept the book. Usually she's big on, if I didn't like it, it's going out the door. It's in the Goodwill pile. And she'll even, and this is an anecdote, she'll store the book upside down so all the words fall out. And that's kind of how I'm feeling with this one. This book is upside down in my brain. Mayday, mayday. This book was bad for me personally. And that's really disappointing because everyone assured me that this book would be great. This is some people's favorite book of all time, and I don't really get that. It's a Spanish book written by Spain Spanish, and it's about this young boy in 1940s Barcelona. One day when he's young, 12 or something, his dad takes him to this secret labyrinth of books, this secret library. You pick out any book you want, and then he picks out something called The Shadow of the Wind by somebody called, I forget the fictional author's name, by some fictional author. And then he really loves this book, tries to find more of this author's work, and then he can't find any of it and realizes that somebody's been secretly destroying all of this author's work. And so it's kind of a cool concept. I was really intrigued by this. The mystery in the beginning was kind of at the forefront, but then we sort of lost track of the mystery, and we were sort of just doing a bunch of bullshit for several hundred pages before actually getting to brass tacks and talking about who the hell was this author and who the hell is destroying all of his stuff. And I don't really like in a mystery book when the mystery takes a backseat to personal drama, especially when the personal drama has to do with women. And by that I mean love women. Hey, wait, love women. What I mean by that is when the young men in the book are just really sleazy and horny and all they care about is girlfriends and lovers, and then me as the reader, I have to sit through all of that. And the misogyny in this book was profound, and not just by the characters themselves, which I can deal with if it's being leveraged to say something about the characters or the time period or the culture, but I could really feel that the author was living through some kind of, or writing about some kind of sexual fantasies of his own, and they were just tits who could talk. They had really no personalities except for the need to be saved, or that they were tragic, or this or that, and it just felt really shallow and annoying. And so that had a significant negative impact to my reading experience. It was very bro-y. It was very a 14-year-old's wet dream kind of experience that I didn't care about because I'm not 14 or a boy or gross. The setting itself was interesting, of 1940s into the 1950s Barcelona. However, I don't know a ton about that time period. I know a little bit about fascism and Spain in that time, just very surface level information. And when I tried, and I did my due diligence, and I tried to research the history and the time period, but I just couldn't get it, because that's what European history is you try to understand one event, but then you need 1,000 years of cultural context in order to understand anything that happens on this godforsaken continent. And I say that as someone who lives here. It was just all a little complicated for me. I just wish someone would sit me down and look me in my eyes and told me all the information I needed to know about the time period. It didn't necessarily detract from the book, me not knowing, the specifics about who is who and like the major ideas and challenges of the time period. However, I felt that if I did, the book would have been a bit more rich, and I'm sure because it was written in Spanish initially for a Spanish audience, I think all of like that target audience probably would have understood it, which is why maybe it didn't do a lot of explaining, like if it had been written in English for an English speaking audience. So I just wish I understood a little bit more, and maybe I could have gotten more out of the book and what it was trying to say, like historically and politically. But in the end, I don't know if that would have saved the general sleaziness of the book, which I was not expecting. Okay, next I read something called Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, and I have already read an Eliza Clark. It's actually the first book I read this year, and still my favorite book I have read this year, and that's called Penance. And I wanted to read this, which I believe is her first novel, and this is about a woman. How do I explain this? I'd say, okay, it's about a woman. She's a fetish photographer, she's an artist, and she's a bartender, and she's trying to make her artwork, and her art is very like demeaning to men, but like in a sexual fetishistic way with her photography. Sort of, they wear masks and she hits them and then takes pictures of them, like, the classic stuff. As far as plot, it's just kind of her operating in the world, trying to make her art, and then also navigating through her life that's kind of falling apart. And what I like about her is what I like about most female characters, is that I love a gal with gumption. And by that I mean I love a bitch. I love a psycho bitch. I love when female characters just have so much audacity. And this character absolutely fits that picture. It's one of those, you love her and you hate her, and you love to hate her because she is just insane. And there's something kind of entertaining, enthralling, cathartic about an insane female character doing insane things, especially directed to men, like sort of reorienting the violence that we deal with and fear on an everyday basis. There's something very interesting and intriguing about this, and the way the book is written is just so compulsively readable. There's like a conversational style to the writing where she's talking directly to you. And one thing I can say about Eliza Clark is that she understands my generation of women the way Hemingway understood his generation of men. Like she gets it in terms of the way we use technology, the way we speak, the way we think, the things that we fear, the things that we care about. And I feel really seen and heard while reading her work, even though I don't directly relate to any of the characters in a very specific or literal way. So I'd say if you're a woman of my age, I'm 26, and I think the author might be 29, so any older or a little younger, I think you would really get it in terms of our specific brand of rage and ennui and fear. So I really like that about this book. It was astonishing and disturbing and deranged, and yet really beautiful in the same way. It's like beautiful the way Car Crash is beautiful, where you just can't look away, and that's what makes it so compulsively readable, because you're thinking, what the hell is she gonna do next? I can't believe she's doing that. I can't believe she's doing that. And that makes it really juicy. And it wasn't just flashy, gory, empty violence. There was a real poignant point the author was making when she was drawing these subtle conclusions about how women struggle to be taken seriously or to be found threatening. You're sort of wondering why she's doing all of this and what she's doing, what the hell the point of the book is. But then when you get to that last like 1 or 2 chapters, it all kind of falls together in a really nice way. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about this book. I think I read it all in like 48 hours. I just couldn't stop. And I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. I am gushing about it in a way, but it is also deranged and disturbing that makes it difficult to recommend to people without them reading the first like 4 chapters and looking at you and being like, you like this? you wanted me to read this. So that's why it's difficult to recommend unless you get it. Like if what I'm saying sounds at all interesting or intriguing to you, absolutely read it, but definitely like buckle in and trust the process. And I think that the quality of the prose will keep you hooked anyway. Then I read something called Braiding Sweetgrass: Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. This is by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is a collection of essays about nature and like the indigenous experience and humanity in general. I found this book really fulfilling and really rewarding. It's finding humanity in nature or trying to connect humanity back to nature. It's about the way indigenous people operate in the world and the way they see things, and how a lot of that is incompatible with the modern age, and that it would be a real benefit to society at large if we reoriented our views or try to revive old ways of living and old ways of seeing the world and finding value in nature and protecting it and loving it and listening to it, because nature has things to say if you know how to listen. And I also found that the writer is really good at writing, and sometimes you get these books by scientists. She's a botanist, and the writing can read kind of clinical, but as a young girl, she was trying to decide between poetry and science, which means that she does have a good handle on the language and narrative. She knows a good turn of phrase, and so the writing is really compelling. And I actually found myself crying through several of the essays, specifically the pieces about motherhood, because I'm a mommy's girl, and there's this great story about a pond in which she's trying to clean out this old pond in the woods that the community once swam in like decades earlier. But then what happens is leaves fall into the pond and then disintegrate or nourish the pond in such a way that it becomes less and less swimmable, and there's sort of algae and there's a lot of muck under the surface, and which is great for other creatures to raise their families, like fish and tadpoles and certain birds, but less compatible for women to have their children swim in it. And there's this real interesting balance of choosing how to handle this kind of imbalance, this sort of situation, and working hard for your children. And there's certain lines in there that really were so touching. I was listening to this in the backseat of the car, and my brother was in the passenger seat, and I'm looking out the window, tears streaming down my face. I'm like, please don't let him look back here, because if he looks back here, it's all over for me. I will never hear the end of it, because there are certain lines in this book that really just hit you like a sucker punch, like something like, oh, from the moment your children are born, every step they take is a step away from you, or every lesson learned or moment that they develop, they're growing further and further away from you. That's really poignant. And there's another essay in this book about like she's dropping her daughter off at college, and that was really touching. And so there's really personal moments that the author is writing about, not just this lake is polluted, somebody should do something about it, or we overconsume and somebody should do something about it. Like there are moments like that in the book of sort of big scale issues between nature and humanity, and then there's also these really soft, tender moments, and that keeps the book interesting when you go when you zoom in and out like that. And it does get a little repetitive towards the end. I would have cut a couple of the essays personally, so for me it's maybe a book you pick up and you read an essay every once in a while and not compulsively read and try and get it all done in a couple of days like I did, and that way the information can sit with you better and maybe it's easier to digest. But I can wholeheartedly recommend this, especially in these hopeless times. It's for me, it's like an antidote to apathy and a shelter from despair, and it's a warm book without it being lighthearted, and it's tender without it being unserious. And then I've got two more books here to discuss. These are both by R.F. Kuang. I've been talking about R.F. Kuang on my channel for months, I think since March when I first started the Poppy War, or maybe that was, I think I read Yellowface in January. So I've been really going through her backlog this entire year, and I had one more book to read from her backlist before her new release came out in late August, I think. And this was the last book from her backlist that I had to read. This is Babel, an arcane history. There's another subtitle in it. Babel, or the necessity of violence. An arcane history of the Oxford Translators' Revolution. So this is an alternative history of, I think, 1820s to 1850s Oxford and their translation institution called Babel. And it's like translation in languages, and that's what it looks like. If you're thinking Tower of Babel, yeah, you'd be correct. This is sort of a parallel to that story. And it's about a bunch of students, specifically foreign-born students who are studying their language and other languages at this institution. And these foreign-born students are valuable to this program in ways that they don't quite realize, and in ways that are sinister beneath the surface. And it's kind of hard to discuss the specifics of this book without spoiling it, because the pacing is quite slow and that nuggets of knowledge are released a little bit at a time, you know, breadcrumb style, that if I were to just start giving you those breadcrumbs now, I think it would ruin that pacing and the slow unraveling, which is an interesting aspect of the reading experience. So I'm going to try and be as vague yet informative as possible. But as you can imagine, because these are foreign-born, non-white students in Oxford, famous white English institution, especially in the 19th century, you can understand that colonialism and imperialism and racism make a big impact in the story, especially in their studies. And there is a low magic system in this book. It's a slight bit of magic that does have to do with translation, and to a greater extent, like, the industrialism that was happening at this time. The magic system for me was a little weird. If you were on Tumblr in the 2010s, first of all, I'm sorry that you were on Tumblr in the 2010s, but if you remember those old prompts that were like suggesting magic systems or like alternative universes, like an example that was going around was what if you wore a bracelet and it counted down the days until you met the love of your life, or what if this, what if that, like these sort of like high concept yet really on the nose little magic or technology systems that were like kind of fun in theory, but like kind of would be silly to implement in a lengthy story. That's kind of how I felt about the magic system, that I just felt it was a little weird. Like interesting in theory, but it did feel kind of forced for me. And that was the first aspect of this book that I found a little disappointing. I think I went into it with really high expectations because I love all of her other books up until this point, and that a YouTuber I really like, Lexi, aka Newly Nova, read this book in a vlog like 2 years ago or something and was weeping on camera. And I love crying, and I really wanted to cry over this, and I really wanted to care about the characters, because in order for me to cry I have to care about the characters, and the characters in this just felt a little slippery, a little intangible, a little surface level in a way that I just couldn't really know them the way that I knew the characters, for example, in the Poppy War trilogies. These characters just really didn't do anything for me. They were just more concerned of explaining their ideas and the ideas of the author, and instead of sort of developing themselves, and when she tried to develop them, she did it in a really telling and not showing way, for example. And then they became best friends, and she would knit sweaters for him every day, and then they would laugh together until they forgot even what they were laughing about. Like, that's kind of a silly paraphrase of a real passage in this book, where I felt like I would rather you give me scenes of them developing a friendship and a relationship rather than you just telling me and then they developed a friendship. That just doesn't work for me. And that happened throughout the book, where it was really telly, and I feel like she was prioritizing the deliverance of her ideas rather than the development of the characters. And because she is an academic and a lot of her books are concerned with the criticism of academia, which I appreciate, I feel like her grasp of narrative and like the mathematics of storytelling, I think she is still working on, and she is in the beginning of her career. I think she's still in her 20s, people. So I can see that she's like getting better at honing those storytelling skills, and then here I just felt that they were a little weak. And I think a major aspect of why I didn't like this was the lack of an insane protagonist, which is what we got in the Poppy War books with Rin, and then the main character in Yellowface was also delusional and psychotic, and she writes those characters really well, that because there was no real psycho centerpiece in this, I just felt it was a little weaker than her other stories. Overall, I did find this worthwhile and interesting, and I would fully recommend it to people, and I didn't hate it, and it is sort of an interesting part of her body of work that has value. I just personally think it was weaker in the storytelling sections, even though I did appreciate some of the themes and the ideas in this. I don't think she's written a bad book yet, and so I would still recommend this. I just was a little disappointed, and I guess that's what happens when you keep writing really good books, is people get, their bars are just really high. Okay, finally, I want to talk about Catabasis, which is R.F. Kuang's new release. It came out like a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago, and I put an alert on my Libby app, which is the library app, and as soon as it became available to borrow, I like immediately put a hold on it and was able to get it in a few days, which was a miracle, because now I've checked like how long the wait for this book is, and they don't even tell you. It's like unknown wait. You could wait 8 months for this or 24 months. We don't know, because the line is so long to borrow this book, because people are obsessed with her right now. I'm feeling kind of trendy. I'm feeling very in the know. So this was kind of nice to read this and then immediately go online and see a bunch of reviews. So it's also about like another semi-fictional history of an English academic space, but this time it's Cambridge. Fun fact, the author went to both Oxford and Cambridge. Doesn't that make you hate her just like a little bit? Anyway, so it's basically our real world in the 80s, except that there's magic, and there's always been magic, and people accept that there's magic. And at the school, they teach something called analytical magic. The magic system, I think, is pretty intriguing. It's sort of pentagram based, where you like draw a pentagram with chalk, and then you like chant some stuff, and then things happen, which I think is interesting. It's a nice departure from wand bullshit. And at the school, we have two academic rivals, Alice and Peter, and their advisor for their degree, I think it's a PhD degree, has died. Oops. And Alice may have accidentally had something to do with it, and through guilt and also needing to graduate, so she needs her advisor alive, she decides that she's gonna go to hell and go get him. And her colleague slash academic rival decides that he also has to go with her. And so then they descend into hell to go get their teacher back. And that concept really intrigued me, because I love Dante's Inferno, and that's something we read in high school, and I'm really intrigued by this idea. And I thought that the execution of hell itself was really interesting, how hell is shaped by a person's cultural context, and the way that a 15th century Catholic and a 1st century Greek wouldn't see the same hell, because it's more impactful to be punished for your sins within your own cultural context than somebody else's. Like, if you're a 1st century Greek, you're not gonna see like Judas in hell, because Judas doesn't mean anything to you. And I think that's really interesting, how the hell in this book is kind of a combination, all mythological records of hell across many different cultures and religions, and so kind of every way hell has been depicted kind of exists in this really nebulous, transformative kind of way. And so when they go to hell, they realize, and this isn't a spoiler because I think this is the last sentence of the end of like the first or second chapter, where they go into hell and they look around and they're like, oh my god, hell is a campus. And that is genius. And so far as pacing, this starts from the word go. Like, we open up, it's like the first paragraph, she's drawing the pentagram, she's going to hell. And I was a little disoriented by that creative choice at first with, okay, no background, we're just going to hell. But then it's heavy on the flashbacks as we go through the book, as we're slowly contextualizing the characters, the relationship to each other, the situation, the history they have with their teacher. The characters themselves are really interesting. We do have a return of that kind of a bit of a psycho delusional female main character, to a lesser extent than like say Rin from the Poppy War trilogy, but she is a really a flawed female character in a way that I relate to and really enjoy. That she's really smart but also insecure and really seeks approval, and she's delusional, but her heart's kind of in the right place in terms of, I want to be great and I want academic success, but then she kind of spins out over it, and she's got a bizarre belief system that she has to reckon with over the course of the novel. And how do you redefine your belief system when core aspects of your world are shattered or significantly changed? And so I really enjoyed her character, and I also enjoyed her dynamic with Peter, her rival. And there's also a bit of a romance in this one, and it's bubbles beneath the surface, and it is an important part of the book, but it is the author's first time doing a romance, which I thought was kind of really exciting. Because it is her first romance, it just did feel like her first attempt at writing a romance, not necessarily in a bad way. It's just every scene in the present and every scene in the flashback, she was making a concerted effort to lay the groundwork for sexual tension in a way that was just kind of beating a dead horse a little. I think we could have lightened up a little on the, and then he looked at me and then I looked at him and then our hands brushed. I feel like we can sprinkle those moments throughout, but having it be a constant presence that of the sexual tension, I think was a little grating, though it did lighten up throughout the book. I think she was just doing a little too much in the first third, and then she kind of ironed it out and figured it out towards the middle and the end. In terms of the academic critiques that are present in this book, I actually think that these are her best critiques so far, and that you're literally killing yourself for a good grade, and the self-destructive nature of students, the two powerful authority figures. Additionally, because of the time period of it being set in the 80s, you could talk about second wave feminism and gender, victimhood, internalized misogyny in an academic context. And that's what I read in August and September. I'm ready for October. I've got a bunch of spooky stuff lined up. I hope you enjoyed this. Upcoming, I'm going to do a ranking all of R.F. Kuang's work. I'm going to do a video for that, so you can look forward to that of me. I've now read all her books, so now I can rank all 6 of them. And like and subscribe, and bye. Okay, see you. Okay, bye.